Hey folks, my name's Justin DiRose. I'm a web developer, productivity writer, and a community owner over at the Productivity Guild. I wanted to start off today by thanking Francesco for hosting ProdCon 2019. I think this is a fantastic place for us all to gather together to learn things about our systems that we maybe didn't know. Now, I've been a productivity nerd for the last decade or so. I started off learning productivity through discovering David Sparks in the Mac Power Users podcast, which led me to folks like Merlin Mann and systems like Getting Things Done. Now, the process of learning productivity methods, systems, and tools honestly has taken me a long time. I feel like I'm only starting to feel comfortable with the systems that I've developed in my life. And over that process, that journey of learning productivity, it's taken me learning to be honest with myself and with other people to really figure out what works for me and what I need. Now, I've been writing about productivity for a few years now, and it's easy for us productivity teachers to look like we have it all together. But honestly, we don't. We have struggles, failures, and issues just like everyone else, just like you do. And I've found that being real about these places of difficulty brings the best ideas and paths forward. Sometimes it's a little scary to open up and share and say, hey, I'm really not getting this. But that opens the door for other people to encourage us and lift us up and bring us into a new place of understanding. And so today, I want to talk about how being authentic and honest with ourselves and with other people gives us the power and the ability to create better systems to lead the effective life, to become the person that we want to be. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to do that. First, to build systems iteratively. Second, to build systems for ourselves and to use cycles of review to help us identify areas that may be causing us issues. And third, to build our systems with others. Now, it's really easy, especially when you're starting out, to think that you have to have it all figured out right out the gate. That I have to have the right folders and the right context inside of OmniFocus, or the right tags inside of Evernote to make sure that I'm capturing and gathering all the information and keeping it and saving it in the right spot so I can find it later. But I realized early on that I tend to heavily overcomplicate things when I try to figure it all out up front. And frankly, you don't have to. And I found it better to start with a light framework and let the system develop as the need arises from there. So, for example, with a task manager, start with something like Getting Things Done, just the basic processes there, and build the rest in over time, or use something like Agile Results. And doing this has alleviated a lot of stress from me because I don't think I have to figure it all out up front. But then additionally, more stress has been released from my life doing this because I don't encounter as much friction in my systems because I can make changes as I go. One way that I've learned to make changes throughout the process of building a productivity system is to start to do productivity experiments. The way I do this is in 2-week cycles. I'll pick 2 or 3 experiments over the course of a couple weeks to have going at one time. And then what I do is I create a project in OmniFocus that does 2 things. First, it pops up a daily check-in where I just ask myself, hey, how's this going? It mainly serves as a reminder for me that the experiment exists and it's something that I'm doing, because sometimes I forget, honestly, if I'm trying to do something new. And it also gives me just a moment to reflect on what actually I'm doing and how it's working. Then at the end of 2 weeks, what I'll do is evaluate 3 things. Is the experiment valuable? Is there anything that I can do to improve the experiment to make it more valuable? And am I actually going to keep it around? And what this process enables me to do is test out ideas that I have or acquire from other people and be able to move on from them quickly if they don't work. Now, I find it really helpful to be able to learn from other people through the sharing of workflows. But there's a temptation especially when we're starting off, to look only at other people's workflows for things that work. Now, let me be honest here. And let's be honest with ourselves. Our lives are unique. While we're all people and we can share ideas with each other that can work on a broad basis, things like Getting Things Done, that's something that has worked for a lot of people because it's very general. But there are specifics inside of your system that are unique to you because your needs are unique. So while other systems may offer good ideas, they're never necessarily going to solve your individual problems. And so to combat this, I've found that as part of the iterative process, to develop cycles of mindful review and using those to identify areas in my system that don't meet my needs is really helpful. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes breaking down what I do to try to review my systems. So on the big picture, I tend to do an annual personal retreat. So a personal retreat is a time to reflect on the previous period of time. For me, it's a year, to identify areas that I can improve in and then plan for the upcoming year. This is the big planning time for me, for projects and dreams for the next year. And with that often comes different needs, different responsibilities. So I'm evaluating in this time if it's important for me to change any aspects in my workflow, if I need to shake it up a little bit because something's not working for me, or if I need to really do some thinking and find a new process for an area in my life or my business. Additionally, I'll do seasonal reviews, and at those times, and those seasonal reviews are actually, once every about 3 months or so. And in those times, I'll review my directions and goals. Directions may be a new term for you, and it's something that I've come up with that's been helpful for me in my system. Directions are year-long intentions that I set. So instead of setting a year-long goal that has a defined endpoint and outcome, what I'll do is I'll say, this is what I'd like to do in this year. This is the direction that I'd like to go. So an example of that for 2019 for me is to increase my social connections, because being a remote worker and a business owner who works from his house, it's not always easy to have social connections. You have to be extremely intentional for that. So the direction that I'm setting for this year is to be more intentional there. One thing I've found with goals versus directions is that sometimes goals can lock us into an outcome and something shifts in that process, and then we have to completely reevaluate our goal. Directions has given me the flexibility to be able to change direction, because the way I see it is that I'm walking down a path. I start at one point, and then I meet a juncture at the path, and I have to decide: am I going to continue down the path of increasing social connections, or is there something else that's more important because of something that's changed in my life? And so seasonally, I'm reviewing those and making sure that they line up with where I want to go. Then, based off of those directions, I try to do goals in 2 to 3 month blocks as well. And so I'll set goals based off of those directions. This helps me just stay in alignment with my overall life direction on where I want to see things go. We can only forecast out, a very short period of time. And so having flexibility over the long-term time scale is really important to me. The next cycle that I tend to go through down further is the weekly review. This is a typical getting things done style review to keep my systems up to date. So I'm going through my task manager, clearing out projects and tasks that aren't relevant, or making active ones that are because they weren't previously. I'm going through Evernote and Bear and my calendar just to make sure that everything's all up to date, that I have everything in my system that I need to be there so that I am current and then I can rely on my system. Sometimes I'll encounter friction during this times and I'll fix them too. It's really helpful to just have these regular check-ins. And lastly, probably more importantly, is I journal. I try to regularly journal, sometimes multiple times a day, and just take mindful stock of my thoughts, emotions, ideas, and my needs. I've found that the wheels come off easiest when my day-to-day needs are not being met. So things like sleep, relational connection, food, exercise, etc. If I'm not taking care of those things, then the whole rest of the system falls apart. So each one of these checkpoints in my system helps me make sure that my system stays relevant to me. I'm constantly evaluating, is this something that actually works for me? And is there something that's coming down the pipe that I need to change in my system in order to make it work better? And sometimes in that process, I'll find problems and I'll try to solve them. but I don't necessarily know how to. And so that's why it's important to remember that we need each other to build our systems more effectively. You really can't solve every single problem by yourself, or even by reading blogs, watching videos, or listening to podcasts. I've done a lot of that. But instead, I've found that every major change that I have made, especially in the last year, that's improved my workflow and system for the better, has come from real relationship with other people talking about where I'm struggling. I wanted to share a couple of examples with you for that. A couple of years back, I started writing a productivity journal on the Productivity Guild. Now, this was before I owned the Productivity Guild, but I just didn't have any relationships in my life with other people that allowed me to talk about productivity. And so this was kind of a new place that I wanted to try to explore. And so I started weekly, during my weekly review, posting my goals and the system successes and failures that I had in a topic on the Guild. Now, the mere process of writing this publicly opened discussions with others, as well as bringing clarity to myself on my needs and what was working and what wasn't. I learned through this process that things like Todoist wasn't cutting it for me. I just had different needs than that tool was able to offer. How experimenting is good. And that it's not always best to have hard and fast goals depending on the situation, just like I talked about with the directions. Another area that being real with folks about my productivity struggles has helped me with is handling my routines. So my wife works really long shifts in the job that she has, just a couple times a week, and the days vary from week to week. Now, being self-employed, it's really great because my wife and I can share the load with taking care of our kids on those days. But that back and forth variability can make it really difficult to find a rhythm that consistently gets things done in your life. And so I was having trouble with this. Honestly, I was really stressed out about it a few months back. And a conversation with a friend of mine helped me realize that I just can't structure my needs into a routine. And in fact, I need to check in with myself to figure out what I need next, whether that's a nap or a break or a different type of work to do or a walk, whatever it is, that I need to spend time reflecting and just taking stock of what's going on inside of me to be able to figure out what I need to do next. Now, to help with this, I ended up creating a Siri shortcut on my phone, which then asks me questions about how I'm doing. It gives me a little notes pop up to just kind of give me a ability in day one to journal what I'm feeling at that moment. And then ask me some questions like, hey, what do you need? Do you need a break? Do you need something else? And how are your relational connections going? Are you feeling connected to your kids? Are you feeling connected to your wife? How about your friends? And from there, based upon my answers, it'll create tasks in OmniFocus for me to follow up on those items to make sure that I'm meeting those needs. Because honestly, that's the kind of person that I want to be. I want to be one who's taking care of myself and taking care of the relationships in my life. And without a set routine, it can be a little difficult to figure out where you're at unless you're really intentional to check in and be honest with yourself about what needs to happen next. Now, I wouldn't have figured out these problems nearly as quickly, and quite a few others, without talking them through with other people. And that requires being humble and real with where I struggle and where I fail. But it's so important to be able to do that because the sum of all of us together gives us the ability to move together forward a lot faster. We all need one another because we can't see all the angles by ourselves. So in wrapping all of this up, the best way to improve your system is to be honest with yourself. You need to iterate improvements, or a good way to approach it is to iterate improvements, to reflect on building a system that meets your needs, and to get help when you're stuck by being real with other people. Now, there's a lot that you can do to go forward and build better systems. But if I were to challenge you to do one thing going forward from this talk, I would challenge you to take 20 minutes this week and ask yourself the question, what's really not working for me? And then spend some time trying to fix it. Talk it out with other people. Figure out what might be broken. And then if you need some help, if you don't have other folks interested in that area that you're struggling with in your life, feel free to come over to the Productivity Guild. We've got a free membership where you can connect with other people interested in productivity and the Apple platform, if that's something that you're on, to ask for help. We'd love to help you grow in your journey to have a more authentic productivity system that helps you become the person that you'd like to be.